Broadcasting from beautiful, tropical Vero Beach, Florida, it's Money Nation with Ed Gardner.
Good morning and welcome to Money Nation. Today's special guest is Steve Letchford. Steve is the co-founder and the president of Banda Health in Kenya. Steve, old friend of mine, we went to Loudonville Christian School together back in the day. And then we both went to actually Shaker High School. Steve then went on to Cornell, where he became a doctor at Baylor University, Cornell first, and then Baylor. Was that right, Steve?
Yeah, University of Texas for med school and Baylor for residency.
There we go. And then from there, he went to Africa. Now, Steve, why does a Cornell-educated doctor from U Texas and Baylor pass up on being a surgeon and the good life in America to go work in Africa and help build some small hospital in Zambia? Is that where you went first? Tell us about that.
It is, yeah. Probably the better question is, why does my wife do it, who's a suburban Texas girl? But I mean, my story was I went to Cornell and I wrote in my essay, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, no, I want to be a doctor one day in Africa or somewhere. And that came from my dad was older when he got married and had worked in Africa, still during the colonial era, and had set up an education system. A lot of the guys he'd trained had gone on to lead the country in independence. And those guys and other of his friends used to show up at our house in Loudonville, actually there, Willow Lane. And he and the guys who were the most fascinating to me were the doctors. And because they had to, I'm a 7, and they have really cool stories about having to kill a mama snake before they do surgery because it's climbing in the rafters, and the power goes out and they got to build a hydro plant or something. So as a kid, those stories fascinated me. And by the time I got to Shaker, it's like, no, I was good at biology, and I didn't even actually know what a doctor really was, honestly, until I was at Cornell and I spent a summer in Nepal. And as soon as I saw what those guys were doing, I thought, and I was with some other people from Loudonville, the Hales were out there, and I said, no, this is what I want to do. So then it was just a matter of what do I got to do it. Sherry was a suburban girl, so she had no idea till her first date what this kind of thing even was, and exactly why she said yes to me, I still don't know, but I'm happy she did. So
yeah.
So
tell us, when you finished school at Texas and Baylor, where did you do a residency first in the U.S. and then you went to Zambia and you were the head of the Mokibi Hospital?
Yeah.
Or clinic?
Yeah, Mukingi Hospital in the northwestern part of Zambia, which is like South Central Africa. So out of med school, then I went to Houston to Baylor's, where I did my internal medicine and pediatric residencies. So I did 2 residencies, and then Sherry got a job in Augusta, Georgia. And so when I finished, we went there and we had loans to pay off and babies to have and things like that. So I was then in private practice in Augusta for 7 years, started a practice and then brought a guy in, then brought another guy in. And when I brought the second guy in, then he came on a Monday. I think I left on a Tuesday. So we had it kind of orchestrated. So, and that practice is still doing great. We did 7 years then in private practice, and Sherry was in private practice as a PT. And 3 of our 4 kids were born there. But even when we moved there, we knew where we were going. At least we thought we knew where we were going, and the country changed a little bit. But by the 6-year mark, it was clear the time was coming to go. And so Mukingi happened to be the place that fit. They needed what we did, and it fit where we were going. So we went sight unseen. We'd never seen the place when we moved there with a bunch of little kids. So it was a experience.
What was it like? Was it like really outback Africa, or was it more of a little city? How remote was it in the first place? No,
Ed, it was. I'm not sure if we'd been before that we would have stayed. Right? It was for an Albany kid and a Texas girl. It was a shocker. Our kids were fine because they were little, and it was outdoors. You could play, but it was. Average income there was probably $1 a day. It was mud huts. We had a little cinder block house with a tin roof and indoor plumbing, right? And that was equated to what you get when you go to heaven. Honestly, you get a house like that. But there were termites, that huge cracks in the walls. Our house was a shocker for us, and it was glorious compared to what everybody else lived in. that, and then probably the killer was HIV. It was the late 90s. HIV was at its peak, no drugs, no PEPFAR funding, and life expectancy dropped into the low 30s while we were there. It was,
wow.
there was
Wow. You saw a lot of that when you were a doctor there?
Oh, it was relentless. We lived right across, it was a 200-bed hospital, and everyone lives pretty close to it if you work there. And so I literally lived right across from the generator and the morgue. And the morgue every single morning. Daniel was 2 when we moved there. And he used to say, "Dad, it sounds like ghosts," because people would wail starting at 6 a.m. and it was for whoever had died the night before.
Oh my Lord.
So yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was sobering. There was a lot for us as entitled Americans. Basically, there was a lot we had to do coming to grips with that. We're just human, and we are not the savior of the world. We're here to get, honestly, as much as to give, because people were exceedingly generous and gracious with us. So it was a great place to do life together with people. And
how many years did you stay there? You helped build that up, and then you handed the reins over to someone else?
We were there 7 years there, and then before we moved to Kenya. And the hospital had hit its 50th anniversary when we were there. We were the last of the missionaries basically heading the hospital. And there were guys, the country had grown, everything had grown. And so I handed over to a guy named, a friend of mine named Fumpa, and he was the guy doing our cataract surgery. And he was the brains. Even when I was heading the hospital, he was the brains behind it.
It's good to have brains, good to have good people with you, right?
Yeah.
So then from Zambia, you went to Kenya and you went to the Kijabe Hospital. Tell us about when you first got there in 2006. How was it? Today it's I think a 350 bed hospital. It's a big 9 operating rooms. They're expanding, you said. It's one of the bigger operating hospitals in Kenya. Tell us about when you got there in 2006 and how things have changed over the last 15 years.
Yeah. It's, we moved there. We never planned to move there. And it was honestly the type of place I didn't want to go because it was much bigger, much more centrally located, had more assets than what I was used to working in. And, but essentially I got multiple sclerosis while we were in Zambia, and eventually I just had to get out of the heat. And so we moved to Kenya because the alternative was moving into air conditioning back in the US. And that's not what I had kind of grown up wanting to do. So we're at 7,000 feet there, and it's got the right location and its ability to train. So we've grown from 200 and low 200 beds to 350, and it's all Kenyan run by a pediatric surgeon, Ken Muma heads it right now, and he essentially has a power team. There's one guy from one of the missions that's still on his team, but it could have been anybody. So it's a top level hospital. So in Zambia, they have 6 levels. And so we do teaching stuff. We do a lot of referral. It's a referral level care. So if you need brain surgery or you've got bad orthopedic stuff or intensive care, that's where you come. So
it's amazing how you're teaching all the Kenyans to be nurses and doctors, and most of the staff are Kenyan, you're saying now, right?
Yeah, and the people who are heading, even just where are we going educationally, or the Kenyans. We're basically there as team members at this point, it's incredible to see. There's been a big push both at the high end. So over the years, we have trained neurosurgeons and plastic surgeons and others. We've also made a big push as a team developing mid-level people. So nurse anesthesia, which in the US you take for granted, we run this often the second busiest operating rooms with nurse anesthesia. Not only did we train them, but our guys started the program together with the government, and the government asked us to extend it. And we've started doing the same with critical care and emergency care. We're training a mid-level cadre that are not physicians that can, if you drop dead in front of them right now, they're the one you want. They will have you on a machine, intubated, your blood pressure back. They know what they're doing. They're very good. And amazing. So it extends care, keeping costs at least somewhere close to what people can afford. So
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, Steve, your new thing is you're now the president and co-founder of Banda Health. Now, you said you still help out in the OR and the ICU, but your 9 to 5 job is not with the Kijabe Hospital anymore, but with Banda Health. Tell us about your new Banda Health and how you're trying to get medical huts all over or throughout the Kenya area. How does that work?
Yeah. So, well, I'll just make a disclaimer. They don't let me in the operating room. That would be dangerous. So they do.
But now you're administrator.
Yeah. No, well, they let me into ICU, so that's okay.
Oh, okay.
But so Banda Health it's a parallel nonprofit basically that we set up a few years ago, and our objective is to use 2 things, and that's technology and relationships to get in and empower, work with the little tiny clinics that are in the slums and the villages, essentially the places that see the poorest patients in Kenya, and now we're extending into other countries. But if you're the poorest patient, where do you go first for healthcare, right? And those are the places we want to get in. The alternative is to go build a bunch of those clinics yourself. No, you could never, people are doing that. You could never get far enough. So our approach has been, how do we get in, meet the guys who are already there, figure out what help they need, and use technology and some relationships to help them. So maybe I'll just start with those 2 things. What is it that actually, what are we doing right now? And we have about 50 clinics that we're working with right now. And they are, you could picture them as a storefront clinic in a slum. So you have a very tight, small road, 3-4 story buildings there, and there'll just be a little place next to the meat market or whatever that happens to be a clinic. And so they are run almost essentially never by a doctor, and they almost never have an accountant. So they're mid-level guys, nurses or health officers that run these things. And we get in and think, great, what do you need? And so the first guy that we did of these 50s is we've been with him. He's really helped us develop. His input has helped us develop. But Boniface started using our stuff when essentially we have, it's software as a service, which, think Salesforce, think Microsoft, Google, their stuff is online and you pay for it as you go. And so we have a solution that's online, which means we can scale it. They have to have 1 computer at least and internet. So right now with cell towers everywhere, internet, even the slums is there, and it's reasonably priced. But once they get that, Boniface uses our system to track every patient that comes in, their name, what they saw him for, how much he charged them, what he sold them, because all these little clinics sell you a drug. So Boniface's worry is someone in the backside in his office stealing his drugs, right? So if he's got Tylenol, now what happened to 1,000 Tylenol? Now there's no question as to where your medicine, you see exactly what you brought in and what you sold. And so for Boniface, even when we first started, just as an example, within a week of starting to use our very early stuff, he was saving an hour a day. How? He didn't have to sit down with his books and count how much money came in yesterday, right? He was no more
simple.
He actually would wake up in the morning and on his cell phone, the system had sent him an email that says, here's your report from yesterday. You go check the money, put it in the little bank thing there, go on. He says an hour a day right off the start. So
that's 30 hours a month, right?
No. Yeah, it's very quick. Yeah. And for he's basically quadrupled his volume in that time and been able to keep his staff, a pretty tight sized staff. He's now building his own place. And we just released another tool, which will save him 16 hours a month doing one government report or a set of 2 government reports. And so it's those kind of things. We will often ask them, what do you need? We figure out what is the problem he and all the rest of them need solving, and we figure out ways to solve it. And the good thing with these guys is they never lie. They don't always know what they want, but when you give them something and they start using it, you got it, right? And so we can see, because it's online, we can see right away, are people using what we gave them? If not, go ask the question again and figure it out. The other
we're gonna take a quick break, Steve. Yeah. Okay, and then we're gonna be right back. Remember, listeners, any questions at all, feel free to always give me a call at 518-255-8854, or you can email me at edgardner@cutterco.com. We'll be right back.
All opinions expressed by Ed Gardner and or his guests on the Money Nation show are solely Ed Gardner's and or his guests' opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Cutter & Company or any of their affiliates. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Ed Gardner and or guests as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only in as an expression of their opinion. Ed Gardner's and his guests' opinions are based on information he considers reliable, but neither Cutter & Company nor affiliates and or subsidies warrant its completeness or accuracy, and it should not be relied upon as such. Always talk to your financial advisor before making such decisions.
Welcome back to Money Nation. So, Steve, by the way, I went to Loudon Christian Grammar School. You did too. Last week's guest was Andy Pesner. Andy Pesner is a 24-year-old kid today out of Loudon Christian, and we talked about his business, him and his brother. He also went to LCS. Laced Up are their sneaker resellers out of Albany and Brooklyn and Queens. They got 6 stores. 20 years old, Steve. They went from 5 million in sales to 20 million in sales last 2 years. Pretty amazing. Yeah. That was a good interview. That was the week before. So we got kids, young kids from Loudon Christian doing good things, great things.
Yep.
Let's go back and talk about what are the clinics like. Tell us a little bit about how these clinics work, and we'll start there.
Yeah. Ed, at this point in my career, and like I'm 60 now, and I'm not sure I ever pictured I'd be doing this when I was 60. Getting to hang out with these guys has been amazing. In these slums, life is incredibly tough, and why you would go and set up a clinic and try to make money in there is a good question when you have your own family raise. And there's one lady who sort of, and there's multiple, but this lady, Mary, her husband just passed, named Joseph, sort of typifies who we get to work with now. And Mary was a successful nurse. She actually had 2 clinics in a nice part of town. She was making plenty of money. Joseph, her husband, was an auditor. It was like 20 years ago, so they're probably in their mid-40s or something, auditor working for the government. They were doing fine. But across the river from one of her clinics was a slum. And she said, when I asked her, like, Mary, why'd you guys start this place? And the place was called Cana. And she says, because Cana is where Jesus did his first miracle, and these people needed a miracle in here. And she says, no, I was right over there. We had a clinic. We were doing great. And one street kid came in, like she thought it was a street kid, came in with a problem. So she treated them for free. She says, you treat one street kid for free, you got all of them, right? And so they all started coming to her clinic. And so eventually she said, boys, where do you come from? And she goes, Mom, come and see, right? And so she said, Saturday morning, 8 o'clock, I met them here and they walked me. And this was like 20 years ago. This was while I was still in Zambia in the 90s. And this HIV was everywhere. And she goes, Steve, she goes, every single room. And again, these are little tin rooms, sort of squalid. She goes, every single room we went in, there was an adult dying of HIV. She goes, and I went back that day, and she goes, that whole next week, I couldn't balance my books. Like I couldn't think. So eventually, and she's a big woman and a strong woman, she went and told Joseph, who I don't think had a choice. She goes, baby, we are selling the house and we are moving down there. We're going to go help those people. And she says, my pastor told us we were crazy. Everybody, she'd been there 20 something years. Well, she gets down there and she literally has to, it's the slums. So who owns the land? The government. No, you can't buy that land, but it doesn't mean you can't pay money for it. So she's paying money to somebody for not even a title. And she gets this little plot in the middle of everything. She puts up some more tin and she says, the women were just dying in childbirth in their house. So she goes, I went to all these little midwife people and said, you keep your money, but deliver in the tin in our hospital, right? Which was these tin things. And she goes, right away, maternal mortality just went down to 0. Because most of the time they're just bleeding post-delivery or something and dying for a reason they didn't. So that starts, she ends up building a clinic and she says, but Steve, she goes, all these kids, they had no education. So they don't wait for anybody's money. They just build a little school. And so they build this school and she gets some teachers to come in. And again, it's a super tight little space in there. Everything's packed. And she goes, while we're there, the teachers start coming to me and say, no, the girls are getting raped at home, right? These little schoolgirls are getting raped in the house. And she goes, huh. So they start this girls rescue center. And again, Ed, it's just everything's in this small block area and it's so compact. And they squeeze another building in that they build a little church down there. When I go down there fairly often. No, they're putting an operating room over the church. And I go, Mary, you guys don't even have a doctor here. She goes, that's all right. We'll figure it out. We have to have an operating room because we have to do C-sections here. Because if we send them out, they don't make it. Right. And she she was just relentless. When you ask her about selling her house, she goes, "That was our kid's inheritance that we sold." And yeah. So that kind of people, and they see probably 300 patients a week down there, 350 patients a week, and they still, even today, they're 20 something years on, they got massive struggles just trying to, when you charge, their average bill is probably $3, and that includes drugs that they're selling people. So their margins are unbelievably tight. But just getting to be down there and figure out, great, what problems do you have? How can we help in a way that works for you? And so we've done that with Mary and her team down there. And then there's plenty of people like that, but they have very basic, if they don't have a computer, they can often get one. They can get basic internet down there. And so there are ways to begin to help them, or getting them connected with other things. Part of what we do is we can not just bring technology, but relationships, and help getting them connected to places where they can get drugs that aren't counterfeit cheaper and things like that. So, yeah.
How many clinics do you have right now? You said, do you have like 50 or 40 or 50 clinics?
47 right now. So we're getting close to the guys. We'll probably be 50 in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
What are your expansion plans for the next couple of years?
I tell the guys, we need to do, our emphases right now are two. One is we've got to get a more powerful solution. So we can take care of their business issues pretty well, and are starting to be able to help them with some of their clinical decision-making problems to a whole nother level. Okay, I think I just lost something here. So getting our solution so it's more powerful, and so that's essentially adding a lot of clinical firepower on the back end. But the other thing is we'd like to get now from 50 clinics to 100. I mean, we started this thing with the goal of getting into several thousand clinics. Wes, the guy who co-founded Banda with me, told me, he's a tech guy, and he's at the beginning, he said, "Steve, no matter how hard the technology is, that's going to be the easy piece. Helping people, figuring out how to get people to use it, and figuring out how you help solve problems, that's going to be the hard piece." And it definitely has. So we can put a new clinic up online in 20 minutes. It doesn't take us any time. And so we could
getting the people in the clinic set up. And who's going to do that? Do you help with that, or do people come, do that themselves? How does that work?
No, it's online. So all we have to do is get a little bit of information from them, and there's a new instance. We send them the
well, I mean, if you got a new little town somewhere and they want to join, does someone have to organize that, or do you help put a new clinic, in a place that doesn't have one currently? How does that work?
No,
do you find locations?
We always work with existing clinics. And so the clinic, yep.
It's already there.
So the clinic basically, and we have gotten some clinics started and we've never visited them. They contact us and they want to use our stuff, and we set them up. We can set them up online easy, because that's what we do. And then we train them. The larger ones, we need to have someone on site to help them begin to learn stuff. So
this software be used in other parts of Africa or other parts of the world? I mean, would you give it away or sell it, or how would that work as far as this software that you've developed for all this?
Yeah, so we have built on an open source platform. It's like SAP. There's an open source version that's fairly mature of SAP that's used in the corporate world, and so that's our back end. And then we put our own front end on it. That's very, very simple. So that piece is there. We have just started working with clinics in Uganda. So we have a number of clinics in Uganda now, and we have our sites on 4 or 5 other countries. And because it's online, we can work in other places. It's not that big a deal. So yeah, I mean, the technology is not the big deal. The people part is, again, the big deal.
So we're running out of time here, Steve. Thanks for being with us. I did want to tell you about I call him Little Steve Letchford, Eamon Rooney, another kid from Loudville Christian, and I'm good friends with his parents. And he was working in Congo as just a college kid. And Dr. Joe, what was his name? Joe
Harvey. Yeah.
Joe Harvey. And he told me, I heard stories of Eamon when he was in basically, very not a tent, but really. And he assisted on these surgeries for almost a year. What a way to get thrown into the fire. And, you're just a college kid and you're sitting there with a surgeon handing him utensils and watching him do surgeries day in, day out. And Eamon now is at Florida State, becoming a doctor. But yeah, when I heard about him, I go, that's Steve Letchford. He's little Steve Letchford. Yep. So Steve, you're doing great things over there. Love talking to you. Thanks for calling in from Berlin. How much longer are you going to be in Germany? When do you go back to Kenya?
We'll be back on November 12th. We'll be back in Kenya. So yeah, not
fantastic. We're going to catch up. We're going to check in with you in the next 6-9 months. I want to hear. It's fascinating what you're doing. Fascinating. You're teaching the Kenyans how to become nurses and doctors and administrators, and it's all great stuff. And really thanks a lot for doing all that work.
Yeah, Ed, great seeing you.
Good seeing you, Steve. And we'll be back. We'll be back in touch with you soon.
Okay,
again, great. Listeners, thanks for being with us today. And any questions, you feel free to give me a call at 518-255-8854. You can email me at edgardner@qatarco.com. And all previous interviews, you can go to YouTube and just search Money Nation. Thanks, everyone, for being with us, and have a great day.